Hello everyone, it's Lennon. Today I thought I would talk about something that I've been doing lately in, I guess with tarot. And I guess it could be said that this would be for my purists out there. I had an interesting comment recently on one of my videos saying that they would consider themselves a purist, right? And they would hope that I would understand that some of the more obscure decks, even the ones I've made, aren't for them. And I've had no offense with that. And it got me thinking that sometimes in my practice, nothing but the classics will do. I love, and I do, I want to stress, I love my collection. I love, some decks I would consider are in purgatory right now, like they're just in a box in my laundry room and they're not getting used, but they're ones that are kind of obscure that I know that eventually I'll probably want to look at again. And I love the ones that are in my active practice collection. Okay, the ones that I normally would go to. But sometimes I do have a purist heart, and sometimes only the Rider Waite Smith will do, or only the Thoth will do. And so I guess in light of that comment, I had gotten this out, which is the Pictorial Key to the Tarot by Arthur Edward Waite. A lot of the information in here is like, to me, would be considered, I don't know, like just weird and not something that even if he, and there's something weird, I keep saying weird, there's something, to me, I always, when I started my tarot practice, I wanted the purist mindset. Like, I wanted to be able to look through this book and say, strange chalices of vision, but the images are more, especially those of the fantastic spirit, right? And I wanted so much to believe that because he wrote this, that's what that card would mean, right? And if you were to like go through these cards from this book and read these descriptions and divinatory meanings, it doesn't always align with what we think we know about the Rider Waite Smith, especially. And so for a long time, I was like, how do I make this make sense with what I guess the modernists would say about the tarot? Have we fallen victim to Reconstructionism within the tarot itself? But I think just for me, I like to go back and see what he would say about the card and how, a lot of it is how in which the cards could actually mean this, because I know he's trying to be obtuse because of the Golden Dawn and the secrets therein. Like, he's really trying to leave stuff out when he talks about the cards. And then Crowley came along and didn't have any secrets, but then he put his own kind of like religious stuff onto the Thoth, you know? But I found some things interesting about the book as I was just like looking through it. This and the Book of Thoth are kind of like those books from a tarot standpoint that I like to go back to, and they're kind of like what I would call my classic tarot books. You know, those are the ones that are gonna give me the most meat that I can chew on, literally chew on like beef jerky, and just kind of stew. And you know, like I like to chew on the stuff. So this and the Book of Thoth are my go-to books. But specifically in this one, I found some cool things, like, and I've knotted them here. In the beginning of the Pictorial Key to the Tarot, there's these things here, I guess before you get into the pictorials of the cards, like, is it even, yeah, it's like right here where they have the emperor and the picture, like what do they call this? Oh, the plate. There's a section where it gives a little bit of his findings on the major arcana, right, in the beginning. And I like that in some of these, there seems to be, it doesn't make sense, but it seems to be like Crowley did in the Book of Thoth. This almost seems to have more information than this. Like his own true thoughts on the cards for some reason. And I kind of like that. I also like that in Arthur Edward Waite, when he talks about the cards, he nods back to a Marseille system or an older system, right? And talks about, still, he's being purposefully obtuse here. But I think he's nodding back to a Marseille system while also trying to obscure the Golden Dawn connotations he's placed into this, deck of his. But I like to see the little nods back as like kind of a historical context. I also like that sometimes when I read about certain cards, I think about a whole bunch of systems, and I think about, like, say for instance, here's the Lovers or Marriage card, right? We often put let's see if I can find it while I'm talking. We often put I guess the keyword for the Lovers card would be choice, right? And it's one of those that I constantly go back to, is as one of those cards in the tarot that is not confusing, but it's more so that it seems to have all kinds of meanings. Like, it can be the Lover with one, where this guy is choosing between a homely girl that's full of heart and a beautiful girl that has no soul, okay? Or, like in the Marseille system. Or it could quite literally be that the Cupid in some of the cards, or the angel in this case, is performing some sort of marriage ceremony. So that could be marriage. It could be choice in who your love interest is, how to know if you're in love, things like that. But then also, it talks in this about truth, honor, and love, and the innocence of that. Because if we kind of go off the way Barbara Moore, Rachel Pollack, some of those old tarot mentors say, the first 7 cards, like Magician through the Chariot, are the innocent part of life. Like, if we're going on the fool's journey type of a, if we're gonna go that route with the meaning, then the 6 is very much still in the beginning. So there's like an innocence there. So instead of it being just love or just choice or just a marriage, it could just quite literally be surface level love in an innocent way, like almost like romantic sensibilities and what that may mean. Like, to be romantic doesn't have to have another person. You can have romantic sensibilities, right? Like, almost like a naive way of looking at certain things, or a rose-tinted glasses type of way. So that's another meaning that I like to put on this card. So sometimes I like thinking about what they say in these classic tarot books or whatever, and try to figure out if that has anything to do with what I think it is, like what I think the card means. It is really a card of married life, shewing father and mother with their child placed between them. And the pagan Cupid above. I love how he says pagan. Like, that just... It's... In this context, it's derogatory, okay? I understand that. But I like that he notes that there's magic at work here. Like, the Cupid is symbolizing this kind of pagan, old world mysticism about it, right? Like, that's what it says to me. It's not, but I also know that term in this context is derogatory. And in the act of flying his shaft is, of course, a misapplied emblem. The Cupid is of love beginning rather than of love in its fullness. So this, like, beginning love, right? The figures are also held to have signified truth, honor, and love. Like, if there's a trinity here, right? Usually there's some sort of trinity that you can look for in the Lover's card. So again, I like these nods back to multiple systems and how you can see, you can really get immersed in it. But, I digress. So I really liked how he kind of lays these cards out in this section, like in the beginning section. So let's go to my next whatever. So here we have the World card, or the Universe card in the Crowley deck. Let's find it in here. And I love that in this specific book, it's a really big thing that, you hear a lot, about tarot, is that these two seem on the surface to be 2 different systems. Let me pull that out. And they're really not. It's just that Arthur Edward Waite was being purposefully obtuse, trying to keep the secrets in, okay? And Crowley, on the other hand, was being very exoteric with with his making of this deck. So, but when we look at these old classic books, it reminds me that the systems are similar than I think. And so when I look at cards from the Thoth, well, specifically these two systems, or these two cards, no, these two decks, when I look at cards from the Thoth and I think, that looks nothing like what Arthur Edward Waite put in this and Pamela Coleman Smith put in this, you know? So what is happening here? And then you look it up in the book and it may say something about, it may use one word and you're like, oh, that's what it means. Okay. So I like that because this says the world, the universe, or time. Now, of course, I always associate like multiple words, multiple cards in the major arcana with the concept of time, like the Wheel of Fortune, the Hermit, because I think he can be construed as Father Time, but it's more of his placement, I think, is why I put him there right before the Wheel of Fortune. So I don't know, but I like that he specifically says the world, the universe, or time, linking the world card and the universe card. When in all my Thoth studies, I would consider this to have a different vibe than this card, but it doesn't. They're the same thing. Even here it says she is in the act of dancing and has a wand in either hand. See, when you're looking at this card, it doesn't seem to be like she's dancing per se, but we know for sure she's dancing in this card. So, or more spiraling, right? It is eloquent as an image of the swirl of the sensitive life, or joy attained in the body of the soul's intoxication in the earthly paradise, which is exactly what's happening in this card. So sometimes when we look at like they look so different, right? I mean, not as some cards, okay? Not like the Aeon versus the Judgment card, okay? And you think that the energies are different, and they're not. So I like the subtle differences in both, but when we find the commonalities, it cements the fact that the systems are not different, not too different, right? Now, in talking about the history of the tarot, he talks about certain people, like this archaeologist Court de Geblin, as having Egyptian connotations, like in this book, right? For some reason, I didn't remember that Arthur Edward Waite put that in here. And we know that the book of, or the tarot, Thoth, the Thoth Tarot has a lot of Egyptian in it. So it was kind of cool to see that, you know, here in Arthur Edward Waite's book. He details out certain things in the tarot that have been, or that have had Egyptian allegories, if you will. Allegories, it does say allegories. Allegories put into the tarot, right? The figures are arranged of the game are manifestly allegorical. And it talks about in conformity with civil, philosophical, and religious doctrine of ancient Egypt. If the cards were modern, no high priestess would be included among the greater arcana. The figure in question bears the horns of Isis. The card, which is called the Emperor, has a scepter terminating in a triple cross. And the card entitled the Moon, who is Isis, shews drops of rain or dew in the act of being shed by the luminary. And these, as we have seen, are the tears of Isis, which fertilize the Nile. But anyway, so he does put, and I'm not sure if this means that he's in agreement with these, or if that people like this Court de Geblin are they placed these Egyptian connotations onto the cards. So I don't know if that necessarily means that he agrees with it. Obviously, Crowley did. So, but then here it says, let me back up a second. Number 9. Okay, the number 9. The word tarot is pure Egyptian, in which language tar, way, or road, and row equals king or royal. It signifies thereof the royal road of life. Alternatively, it is derived from a doctrine, Rosh, Mercury, and Thoth, and the article T in some Tarosh. Therefore, the tarot is the book of Thoth, or the table of the doctrine of Mercury, which we know, book of Thoth, right? So I thought that was really interesting that he actually worded book of Thoth in this book. I was like, wow. So let's move on to the next bookmark. Oh, he goes more into the book of Thoth here. It says, as regards tarot claims, it should be remembered that some considerable part of the imputed secret doctrine have been presented in the pictorial emblems of alchemy, so that the imputed book of Thoth is in no sense a solitary device of this emblematic kind. I think that when he's trying to give us the historical background of the tarot, he talks about these things. He talks about the deck from across time having Egyptian connotations, alchemy connotations, and things of those natures. Whether or not he agrees with those, we don't know. But we do know that certain, especially masonry and certain branches of occultism, are hidden in this more so than they are in the Thoth deck. So that's the only real difference. And another comment that I had recently was on the Wheel of Fortune card and how it differs in each system, I guess you could say. There's really nothing in the text here that would suggest that, I guess, that would nod to the Thoth, but really the only difference in the two cards is that Crowley likes to put the Tree of Life connotations and associations onto the cards, and the Hebrew letters. So the fist here is a nod to Kof, which is, I think, how you pronounce it, which means fist. And then the Tree of Life connotation really is where it's placed on the Tree of Life and the abyss. It's a relationship to the abyss. Right here, we see this line here. That's the below the abyss. And then up here with all these stars and stuff is this crown, but also the crown of the supernal triad. And the supernal triad is down here as well in the triangle in the background. But we still have the Sphinx, the Typhoon, and the Hermanubis present here like we do on the Rider Waite Smith. So that's really the only difference, is that Crowley wanted to, not that they're not present in this, okay, the Tree of Life and the Hebrew letters aren't in, it's not that they aren't in this, it's just that Crowley wanted them shown. So that's really the only difference. The Wheel of Fortune energy, the card itself is the same. Place those connotations onto the cards in both sets of decks, in both decks. So this being the Jupiter card, it's expansion, it's good luck and bad luck, it's change, it's time, and that's really the same for each card, meaning-wise. So, but then when we start expanding and we look at some of the cards that wouldn't make sense typically, or that we think wouldn't make sense, I guess you could say. I'll go back here, like the 10 of Wands here, okay? In the Thoth, let's see, Wands are up here. There we go. 10 of Wands is oppression, okay? That's the key word, Lord of Oppression, right? That's the hermetic title. And you don't really see a similarity in the cards, okay? But this is oppression too. And I wanted to stress, it says, a man oppressed by the weight of the 10 staves which he is carrying. That's all it says before he gets into the divinatory meaning. A card of many significances, and some of the readings cannot be harmonized. He says that a lot. He seems to say in this that, like, if something doesn't seem to make sense, he leaves it at that. He's like, oh, well, you know, we can't make sense of this, so we're going to leave it there. That could be, when you read between the lines, that's probably where a secret lies that he's not going to tell you about. That he's made up his mind is going to remain a secret, if you will. So, but I like how this is oppression, right? The hermetic title is Lord of Oppression. And in this, in the Rider Waite Smith card, we think that, but we don't really, we wouldn't have used oppression as the key word here. You know, we would have used some other word, but they're typically the same thing. And I like how in some cases, especially in this specific book, he actually, Arthur Edward Waite uses the exact words that Crowley would use, or that the hermetics would use, okay? I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards in the tarot deck, is the Two of Wands. And with it being the wand suit, I guess if you would say two of my delineating cards in the tarot deck would be the 2 and 8 of Wands. I just like their cards for what they are. And when I come back to the 2 in the Thoth, it's dominion, right? Now, dominion to me means domain, like your kingdom or whatever. And so I've often put, especially in the Thoth deck, that this is just, you have a kingdom. This could be self-kingdom, like your body is a temple, or this could be whatever you're responsible for, like your house, right? Like your homestead, or your kids, or whatever. Like you have responsibilities. That would be what this card would signify to me. So if it would come up in a reading, I would think about those things. And he talks about that in, A.E. Waite talks about this in this card too, how a tall man looks from a battlemented roof over sea and shore. He holds a globe, while a staff in his left hand rests on the battlement. Another is fixed on a ring, which is right here. And then further down it says, the design gives one suggestion. Here is a lord overlooking his dominion and alternatively contemplating a globe. So we already know that dominion is, even though they don't look the same, and you wouldn't automatically think that this is his domain and he's looking at, you think wanderlust, you think he wants to be somewhere else other than he is. It's kind of where I was coming at this card when I first started learning. But when I read these things, I like that it nods, that they're nodding to each other. You know, they're speaking, the decks are speaking to each other. I like that. So, I mean, you know, we can just flip to any card. Not really the quartz, because A.E. Waite tends to put physical characteristics on the quartz that I don't agree with. I tend to think of the quartz as personality traits and characteristics, yes, but in a more universal, generalized way. Not so much specifics, you know? Like these are like the concept of invention, the concept of mastermind, right? Like the MBTIs, you know? Like I want to be able to view them as anyone. And so that's why I don't really, you know, think about the quartz, especially from A.E. Waite's perspective. I don't really, But we could just flip to any card, right? And look at it in both decks. I guess I've stopped doing that with this because the pictures are here. But, you know, we go to the Four of Swords back here somewhere. Okay, truce. Automatically, you don't really see truce in this effigy, okay, in this Percival card, okay? You don't automatically see the similarities, right? It says, an effigy of a knight in the attitude of prayer at full length upon his tomb. Vigilance, retreat, solitude, hermit's repose, exile, tomb, and coffin. It is these last that have suggested the design. And you're thinking, okay, well, what made you think tomb and coffin, right? And that's another secret. I guess you could say a hermetic secret. The tomb coffin connotation or keyword that he would say here is obviously a secret because he doesn't give us any kind of clue as to what they may mean. But if we think about it, and like I said, read between the lines, when we think about a knight in rest, okay, not an actionable knight, right? Like the knight is not going to battle. He's not doing anything actionable in this card, right? But he's still stable because it's a 4. So it's like those middle grounds between what would a knight be doing in his off time, right? Training, but that's actionable, right? So this is a little bit more stable than that. So we could say he's contemplating strategy, Okay? It's like a quiet, what are the almost passive actions of a knight? And that's what I would think this Four of Swords would mean. Especially in truce, we're thinking you're planning stuff out, right? You've got all your documents, right? You're looking over maps, right? And it's not, it's less active and more passive. So that's kind of where I want to see, that's kind of how I see the similarities between the two decks, is I try to place what I see in one deck and how would that relate in another. And I kind of like that. This doesn't mean that all the other tarot books that you would have are wrong. And it doesn't mean that they're any less pure in their associations. I believe that when certain authors, like the mentors I spoke of before, come at tarot, they're using their own biases. They're using their own meanings when they look at a certain image. Okay, so they pull a card to write about, okay, like this. It's a good example. Like the Five of Pentacles, right? Actually, let's go to the Five of Pentacles here. Now, while A.E. Waite here would not say very much, there might be a page for this because we've put so many keywords and so much desolation energy into this that it's almost like tarot has become egregores of themselves, right? Like, because so many people have said that this is a card of desolation and despair and weakness, you know, pain, suffering of some kind, and then you place it onto the Pentacles suit and you add even more. It's material desolation, it's destitution, right? So indigence, and you have so much to say because of what other people have said, and a lot of books have done that. It doesn't mean they're wrong, it just means that they firmly believe that they know what this card means. When with me, I like to go back to the ones that made this deck and say, okay, let me shed some of the biases and see what I can see then. And it's hard to do. I mean, I'm not even successful in it half the time. It says, 2 mendicants in a snowstorm pass a lighted casement. So this doesn't even suggest that they want to go inside, you know, for sanctuary, that they need sanctuary. It just says they're passing this casement. So, of course, in our minds, we're like, oh, they need to go in because they need to come in from out of the cold and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't even suggest this in this. And he's the one that made this deck. Is that another secret? Right? I'd like to think that if we were going back to the Thoth here, okay, we have worry, right? And when you look at this card, you think desolation and destitution, right? But you don't think about worry. You don't think they're worrying about the outcome of, like, and where they're going, right? It doesn't have to be this church. They're worrying about their life. They're worrying about something. They're worried about their broken leg. They're worried about whatever. They're worried about their money. And it's more so the feeling of worry than actual destitution. It's that these people are in their heads about their suffering. To me, that's how I would link the two. So, but there's so many great tarot books out there that I even like. I like Tarot 101 by Kim Huggins. I like Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. Let's see, the other, Tarot Correspondences by Susan T. Chang. I think that's who wrote that book. And of course, all my Thoth books. Like, I like Understanding the Thoth Tarot by MacLeod, my Mirrors of the Soul, and Book of Thoth. Those are my, and the Angelise Aaron book, Tarot Companion, Tarot Guidebook, something like that, Tarot Handbook. Those are my Thoth books. And then you've got Rider Waite Smith books. And there's so many more books out there that have really good tarot meanings on there. But again, I find myself, when I'm in that purist mindset, going back to these, what I would call my classic books, and figuring out if I can erase what everyone else has said and see if I can read between the lines of the original creators. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does. So really, I go to this just to look up what Arthur Edward Waite said and see if I'm able to shed some of my own biases when I look at a card. So there was a little on my, I'm feeling like a purist today. I hope this was fun. I just wanted to nod to the purists out there that sometimes when you're doing tarot and you love all your tarot decks, you know, like you love the ones that are on your table. They have such pretty images. They're speaking your tarot language. But sometimes only the Rider Waite Smith will do, or only the Thoth would do, or only the Marseille would do. And I didn't pull out my Marseille because I have a specific tarot classic book for Marseille that I want to get out and highlight and beef jerky, chew on that stuff. And I want to make a video devoted to Marseille. I guess Marseille, the purist of the Marseille, or Marseille purist video, I guess you could say. But this was for these two decks today. Let's see what we get. I'm dropping cards all over the place. All right, I've shuffled it enough. Ooh. 8 of Swords. A woman bound and hoodwinked, with the swords of the card about her. Yet it is rather a card of temporary durance than of irretrievable bondage. Bad news, violent chagrin, crisis, censure, power in tremors, conflict, Okay, when I look at this card in the Thoth, it says interference, right? You don't really see the similarities. But if I were to erase all the biases here, look at the keyword, look at the fact, look at the astrology, right? Look at where it is on the Tree of Life, or the 8s, I guess you could say, on the Tree of Life. And then look right here, and what he says, he does use the word censure. I kind of like to think about this in terms of, like I've said this before, radio waves. Like you're getting static, you're getting white noise, right? And there's this distractionary nature to white noise. Sometimes practically, but then also like you're stopped from saying something. You're like actually shunned from doing something, and that's that feeling that we're seeing here, the hoodwinked feeling of being stopped from society, like the society, the culture, whatever that you're dealing with is preventing you from doing something. And you have to make that decision whether you're going to come out of the swords and unhoodwink yourself. And you're not going to allow the interference. So that's what I would say about this card. Actually a good card for what we're talking about today. You know? So, all right. Let me know your thoughts. Hope everyone's having a good day. Much love.